Today we're going to be making a ribbed sweater. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment and I'll try to answer your questions, and also comment any suggestions you may have for future tutorials. Thank you and enjoy. In this project, we're going to make 4 separate pieces, 2 identical sleeves, and 2 identical front and back panels. Once we finish all 4 of these pieces, we're going to slip stitch them together. And I used a total of 575 grams of Caron cakes in the color Raspberry Ice. Each cake is 240 grams, so I used just over 2.5. I'll also be using a 5mm crochet hook, a yarn needle, and some scissors. So we'll start off with the sleeves, and the first thing we'll need is a slip knot. And to do a slip knot, grab your yarn and lay it over the palm of your hand with the tail end at the bottom. Then grab the top and wrap it around 2 fingers to form an X, and then using your hook, we're going to go under and then over and pull the yarn through, and then we'll remove our fingers and tighten the knot. And this tail end that's left over should be about 5 inches at least. And now we're going to chain the length of our sleeve, and this is including the ribbing. To chain, yarn over and pull through. Again, yarn over and pull through. And we're going to continue making these chains until we get the length of the sleeve that we want. I did 70 chains, but you can do more or less depending on how long you want your sleeve to be. Once you've chained enough chains for the length of your sleeve, and I did 70 because it's a nice round number, first we're going to make sure that we have the right number of chains because we're making an identical sleeve and we want them to be the exact same length. And note this number down if it's different from mine. So again, I have 70 chains right now. Now we're going to do one more chain. So now I have 71 chains. This row is going to be 10 slip stitches and then 60 double crochets. So first we'll start with the 10 slip stitches. So we'll skip the first chain and then do a slip stitch into the second chain. So to do that, we'll insert a hook into the second chain from the hook. And then we'll yarn over, pull through, and then we'll pull through again. And then we'll move on to the next chain. So again, insert your hook into that chain, yarn over, pull through, and pull through again. So we've done 2 slip stitches and we're going to do 8 more for a total of 10. So now we have a total of 10 slip stitches, and this is what's going to be the ribbing part of the sleeve. If you want the ribbing shorter, then do less slip stitches, and if you want it longer, then do more. So now we have 10 slip stitches, and we're going to do double crochets now for the rest of the sleeve. So into the next chain, we're going to do a double crochet, and to do that, yarn over, insert your hook into the next chain, yarn over, pull through. Now you should have 3 loops on your hook, and we're going to yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and yarn over, pull through 2 loops. And again, to do a double crochet, yarn over, insert your hook into the next chain, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. And for the rest of the chains, we're going to do double crochets only. So again, we have a total of 70 stitches. The first 10 are slip stitches, and then the last 60 are double crochets. And you'll notice that these slip stitches are shorter than the double crochets, so you'll have a noticeable bump, and it's exactly what you want to make that sort of sleeve cuff look. Once we reach the end of the chain, we're going to chain 2 and then turn. And now on top of the double crochets, we're going to do double crochets. On top of the slip stitches, we'll do slip stitches. So now for the first 60 stitches, we're going to do double crochets, and then the last 10 will be the slip stitches. But for this round and for the rest of the rounds, we will be working in the back loops only. So to do that, after we chain 2, we're going to yarn over, insert our hook into that stitch, but we're going to go from the top into the V and then out the back, grabbing only the back loop. And then we'll yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So every time we double crochet, we're going to go in from the top, through the center of that V, and then go out the back. So again, 60 double crochets and then 10 slip stitches. And these are all going to be worked in the back loops. And once we reach the end, we're going to chain 1 this time, and then turn. and we're going to do 10 slip stitches and then 60 double crochets in the back loops only. So if you end a row with double crochets, you're going to chain 2 for the next row. And in this case, we end the row on the slip stitch side, so we're only going to chain 1. And then we're going to continue our pattern of 10 slip stitches, 60 double crochets, and then chain 2, 60 double crochets, 10 slip stitches, chain 1. We're going to continue doing this pattern until we reach the size of the sleeve that we want. I did a total of 34 rows, but if you want a wider sleeve, you can keep adding more rows, and if you want a smaller sleeve, then you can do less than 34 rows. So here I've done my 34 rows, and now we're going to slip stitch our sleeve closed. So we're going to grab from the bottom and fold it up. And then we're going to turn our work so we can work from right to left, and then chain 1. And in the flap on top, we're going to insert our hook into the back loop of the first stitch, and then we'll go over to the other flap, and you can see sort of little bumps, and those are the bottoms of the stitches on the other side. And then we'll insert our hook into the little bump on the end, and yarn over, pull through, and pull through again. And we're just going to continue slip stitching all the way across. So again, we'll go into the top flap in the next stitch over in the back loop, then we'll go over to the bottom flap and go into the bump in the next stitch. And then we'll complete our slip stitch and then go back to the top flap in the back loop of the next stitch and then over into the bottom flap. And then we're just going to continue slip stitching all the way across to connect both ends to form a sleeve. And then if you can, leave your yarn attached to the sleeve because we will be slip stitching the sleeve onto the rest of the sweater from this point. If you can't leave it attached, then leave a really long tail end that you can use to slip stitch the side of the sweater. If I had to guess, I would say to leave about 10 feet of yarn just in case. But if this does end up being too short, I'll also show how to attach more yarn. So now that we're done with the sleeve, we can make an identical sleeve, and also if you can, leave the yarn attached for this sleeve. If not, just do the same thing I said to do earlier. Now we can start the main panels of the sweater. So this starts out the same as the sleeve. We're going to do a slip knot and then chain 71, but this time we're going to be doing single crochets instead of slip stitches. So once you've chained 71, we're going to skip the first chain, then insert a hook into the second chain from the hook, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. And again, to do a single crochet, insert your hook into the next chain, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through the 2 loops on your hook. And we're going to do this 8 more times for a total of 10 single crochets. So after our 10 single crochets, we're going to do the same thing we did with the sleeve. We'll do 60 double crochets. Once we reach to the end, we'll chain 2, turn, and then do 60 more double crochets, and then 10 single crochets. And here we're just forming the shoulder part of the sweater. So I continued doing these rows until the length was the same as the length from the outer part of my arm to the base of my neck is. And for me, that was about 13 rows. But you can do more or less if you want. And I will be doing a really short sort of turtleneck part, but if you don't want to do that, then you actually can just repeat these same rows for the entire panel, and that does make it a lot more simple. And if you do choose to just skip the neck part, you can also skip right to where we stitch everything together. So for the neck part, at the end of our 13 rows, we're going to chain 6. And this is going to be about the height of your turtleneck, and you can make this even longer if you want. And it does sort of sink down, so you'll need to make it a little bit longer than what you actually want. So after you do 6 chains, we're going to turn, and start working into those 5 chains with single crochets. So we'll skip the first chain, insert our hook into the second, and complete our single crochet. And then for the next 4 chains, we'll do single crochets as well. I chose to use single crochets instead of double crochets just because I know the neck part will probably stretch out over time, so I want it to be as tight as possible right now. Once we reach the double crochets, we're going to do double crochets in the back loops only. And then we'll reach the end with the single crochets, and we'll do our 10 single crochets on top of those. And this continues like the rest of the pattern. We'll chain 1, turn, do 10 single crochets on top of those 10 single crochets, do 60 double crochets on top of those, and then do 5 single crochets on top of those on the other end. And since we have single crochets on both ends, we're going to be chaining 1 for both ends. So I continued this for 23 rows, and this was about half the circumference of my neck because you want it to fit snugly but not too tight, and you still want to be able to get it over your head, but it does stretch, so that's not a big problem. Once we finish 23 rows, we're going to continue on to the next row, but before we reach the 5 single crochets on the end, we're going to pause and then chain 2, turn, and continue the 60 double crochets and 10 single crochets. And we're going to finish the other side of the shoulder. And once you do the same number of rows for this side of the shoulder as you did for the first side, and mine was 13 rows, then we're done with one panel of the sweater. And now if you can, again, leave your yarn attached, then do so, but if you can't, then make sure you have enough yarn to slip stitch the top of your shoulder. And this is a lot less than what you'd leave on the sleeve. I would say about 3 feet is enough. And now we're going to do the exact same thing for one more main panel. And once you finish this second panel, your yarn should already be attached. So now we're going to slip stitch the front and back panel together along the top of the shoulder. And you want to make sure that when you lay your panels on top of each other, the side that you finished your last row on should be opposite. So my top panel will have my yarn attached on the right side, and then my bottom panel is on the left side. This is so we have yarn on either side to slip stitch up the shoulders. And now we're going to do our best to line the top and bottom panels together as closely as we can. And we're just going to insert a hook into either panel and slip stitch them together like we did with the sleeves. And we're going to slip stitch each row together with 2 slip stitches. And once we finish slip stitching the top of the shoulder, we'll move on to the turtleneck part. And here we have actual stitches to line up, so make sure to try to line up the 5 single crochets together. Once we're done, we can fasten off by chaining 1, cutting our yarn about 5 inches to weave in, and then pulling through with our hook. And now we can turn this over and work on the other shoulder. So if you run out of yarn while you're slip stitching, here's how you can attach some more yarn on. So first you're going to fasten off with the rest of your yarn by chaining 1 and then pulling through, and then insert your hook into the next stitch and loop your new yarn onto your hook and pull it through the stitch. Then tie a double knot with that yarn and insert your hook back into that same stitch and pull up a loop. And now you can just continue working your slip stitches. Once we finish both shoulders, we can start attaching the sleeves and stitching together the sides of the sweater. So first you want to make sure that your sleeve has the noticeable stitching facing out. So we're going to start at under the arm and then go up to the shoulder, stitching together the top panel with the top of the arm, and then we'll go along the back and stitch the bottom panel with the back of the arm. And then once we reach that point at the underarm again, we're going to stitch down the side of the sweater. So make sure that you fold and position your sleeve so that we can start stitching at this point under the arm. And then we're going to try to align the tops as perfectly as possible. And if you want, at this point, you can use safety pins or bobby pins to perfectly match half of the sleeve to the front panel and then the other half to the back panel. And just for reference, your sleeve might have come out a little bigger or smaller than mine, but I attached mine to the 29th stitch down. I did end up just eyeballing it because it's not going to be noticeable if it's a little bit off. And just like we did with the tops of the shoulders, we're just going to be slip stitching all the way across. And I do like to turn it so that it's easier to work with. And also here's a closer look at what I'm doing. And here I've almost finished stitching the top panel with the top of the sleeve. You want to make sure that when you're doing this stitching part, everything is laying completely flat. And once we reach the shoulder part, we're going to turn our work so we can work on the back panel and the back of the sleeve. And here's a tip to get a less noticeable seam, unless you do want the puffy look at the seams. But if you don't, you want to look at the top of the shoulder and make sure that it's completely straight and not indenting where the stitching is. Once we reach the point that we started at, we're going to transition to working down the side of the sweater. And we'll just continue working down the side of the sweater to connect both panels. And here's how it looks so far. Once we're finished stitching this side up, we're going to fasten off and attach the other sleeve. And when we turn it inside out, here is how it should look. And you want your second sleeve to match how you attach the first sleeve. So what I did was I counted down 29 stitches from the top, and I placed 2 safety pins on the front and back panels. And it just lets me know that these 2 stitches are where I'm going to start and where I'm going to stop. So now I'm going to start attaching my sleeve into that stitch that I put the safety pin in. And I'll work my way over the top panel and the top of the sleeve, go around the shoulder, and work on the back panel and the back of the sleeve. And then I'll go on to the side of the sweater, and I'll finish stitching down the side of the sweater. Once we're done stitching, we'll fasten off, and the very last thing to do is to weave in our ends. The first thing I like to do is pull all of the loose ends to the inside of the sweater and then tie them. To weave in your ends, you want to take a loose end and insert that into a yarn needle, and then weave your yarn needle under your stitches. And since this loose end is right next to the seam, I can just weave it in and out of that seam. And then you want to go back the same way you came at least once. And since it's in 2 different directions, it makes it harder to come loose. And if you have a little extra left, you can either cut that off or go back again a second time. And here is the finished product. If you guys like this tutorial and want more, please leave a like and subscribe. Also comment down any questions you have about this pattern and any suggestions for future videos. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.